My name is David Frazier. I teach computer science and software engineering at the University of Virginia's College of Wines. Turn my microphone the right way. It doesn't want to do. Okay, so this video is going to be about using artificial intelligence correctly and ethically to aid in your research efforts. So I'll talk a little bit about the history of AI, the strengths of AI, weaknesses of AI, things to watch out for, and some things that you can use AI for to enhance your research efforts. Okay. So artificial intelligence, or AI for short, is really transforming many sections of our lives, many sectors of the economy. There's no doubt that some jobs that are there now are going to go away or be modified. Other jobs will be created. So you can't overemphasize the societal impact of artificial intelligence. Okay, it really is going to be a big deal. And that includes the academic world. So there are things that AI does very well that it will start to do for us. But there are other things that AI does not do particularly well, and we're going to have to continue to do for ourselves. And I think that's okay. So again, this is a general overview. You can get very specific about artificial intelligence. There are people that study that for a living, and you can go very deeply down the rabbit hole if that's your interest. So I'm going to start with just a brief history of where we are with artificial intelligence. This has long been a goal of people to have this kind of a tool. And a lot of the work goes back to Alan Turing. Alan Turing was working during 30s and 40s, especially up through World War II. He is known most for his work on cracking the German Enigma code during World War II, which was of great importance to the Allies in the war effort. Okay, so Alan Turing was a mathematician, and a lot of what we do with computer science comes down to the work that Alan Turing did. So he's still a very important figure in computer science. But in particular, his link to AI has to do with what is now known as the Turing test. Okay, so the Turing test says, and its original version is a little different from what it's become, basically that if you have a person in one area and a computer in another area, then if a person, actually, let me back it up, that's a newer one. If somebody were talking to an artificial intelligence through some mechanical method, then it would not be possible for them to tell whether or not that was a real person, basically. Would there be any clues that they were speaking to a computer? And until recently, the Turing test was the gold standard, and it was never quite passed. I think now that the bar has moved a little bit, the Turing test is not enough. So there are some other things that we're going to look at. So the Turing test was developed in 1950 when it was first put into a paper. Okay, and I think there's more that we're thinking about with that. So, but that led directly to the beginning work of some AI programs in the 1950s. ELIZA was one of the early ones, which was meant to be a computerized psychotherapist that would ask questions and then give you answers back based on that. And these were all pretty basic systems. Okay. As we move later into the 20th century, we started to see the rise of what in the 1980s were called fuzzy logic systems. Okay. So with the fuzzy logic systems and the expert systems, it departed from the traditional computer science way of simply input-output models where there could be multiple things to do. And the goal would be to look at all of the different factors that an expert would do to make a decision, like on a loan, should we do this loan or whatever it was. Okay, so those continue to develop more. One of the big developments was the development of neural networks. A neural network is a series of computers that are strung together or connected together through a network that attempt to function as if they were parts of a brain and can work together. And that's a simplified solution, but that's the basic idea. Okay. So that's AI up until now. What we're starting to get within the last year, pretty much, is what's called generative AI. And the generative AI, the generative part means that the AI can produce answers that appear to have been written by a human. It generates its own answers. Okay. And this is a pretty massive breakthrough. So this really didn't happen until it did. It happened pretty quickly. And OpenAI and their Chat GPT was the first to really make a splash. There have been systems working for a long time, but that was the first really commercially prominent entry into this market. So these are all based on this idea of an LLM, or a large language model. And there's several of those out there. What a large language model allows you to do, or allows the computer program to do, is to read through the text, some text source, break that down into its component parts, and form a logical structure, a mathematical structure on the text. Okay. AI does not understand anything. It does not generate answers from its own knowledge. What it does, because we're able to code lots of data into these models, and then the question gets turned into the same form as the models, it just does a matching of those to find answers to your questions. Okay. So it may seem as if it is thinking, but it's not, and it can't. Okay. So in the humanities area in particular, which I think most of you are in, I could be wrong there, but there's a lot of areas where AI is starting to have an impact. Okay. And this has been going on for a little bit, but it's getting more powerful. And the first is through textual analysis. If you want to look through a large body of text and you want to find patterns, you want to know, did the same person write these two things? This is work that a human could do, but would be very tedious and very time consuming. So AI has started to make this to be a little easier. So we're applying it to more text. Okay. There's also translation from one language to another has been enhanced by running it through an artificial intelligence who knows the syntax or the grammar of an individual language. Okay. So those can be good. And we'll do some examples here in a minute. It can be very good for idea generation. And this is really, to me, if I were in grad school looking for how can I use AI to help me out, well, idea generation is really a great thing for it to do. Now, it's not going to create a topic for you out of whole cloth, but if you contextualize what your interests are, it can suggest it to you topics that you may want to look at. Okay. And I found that I use ChatGPT in particular a lot in my teaching to generate ideas that I almost never use entirely, but it gets me thinking about things. So, for example, if I'm teaching an operating systems class and it's time to do the final, I may say, create 20 questions that should be on an operating systems final for me. And it will. And I don't use any of them, but I use it as a way, at least I don't use many, but I use it as a way to make sure that I'm not forgetting something. It's kind of a double checklist for me. And I think that certainly is a good way to use it. Okay. Um, it can be used in for data mining for whatever topic. And this is not really in the humanities, but I know that something like cancer researchers, when they're looking at what are all the factors we know about cancer patients, they have, whatever kind of cancer. Well, it would be impossible for enough manpower to look through all that data looking for patterns. But with AI and machine learning, which is a related field, it's certainly possible to set the computer doing this, and it can discover patterns that you would not otherwise discover. Okay, and again, it discovers that. Sorry, I'm getting text here. There's no way to stop that, so it's just going to beep a bit. So I apologize for that. But you can look for these connections that you would not otherwise see. Okay. So that's a very important task that it can do. Okay. So with interdisciplinary research, it can look at crossing over. If your area of study is one, say you're in English literature, and you're interested, how would that affect, say, physics? Okay. You may not be an expert in physics, but by asking some questions to the Chat GPT, it can get you started. Okay, to me, in some ways, it's like Wikipedia. So I know most professors correctly do not allow quotes from Wikipedia, but I've used it myself as a way to get a broad overview of the topic and to look at the bottom for what sources they're citing as a way to get me going. Okay. And I think we can use it for the same way. I think this is what it's good for. Okay. So we always have to consider here ethical considerations of AI. Okay. So the biggest issue, and it's an actual absolute hard line you cannot cross. You can't create work through artificial intelligence and submit it as your own. That's plagiarism, pure and simple. Some people argue in a very pedantic way that, well, you're not copying from a person, so therefore it's not plagiarism. No. If you turn in work that is not your own, you're guilty of plagiarism. So that's it. Okay. So that's the hard line you don't cross. Okay. So other things that you have to be careful of. That's not always where you take a whole document and turn it in. Okay. You can also have where you are over relying on the artificial intelligence. Okay. That you're taking too much of the work from the AI and not doing enough yourself. Okay. I think that AI works best when there's human intelligence leading it. It's a tool, it's not the end. Okay. So I think it's important that you don't allow it to take the lead, okay, in your research project. Okay. I think the other issue is that there are often what we call hallucinations. Excuse me. So a hallucination is basically just misinformation. Okay. So the way the current generative AIs work is that they have scoured the open internet and sometimes not so open internet for lots of text that it just reads in. Okay. So when you ask it a question, it's going to accumulate from all of that data that it's read in and answer for you. And there's no guarantee that that answer is going to be correct. It could be wrong. And there are some pretty well-known examples of hallucinations with AI. Okay. And if you don't know the difference, you're going to assume that's correct. I was helping a student with a math problem, and we were trying to figure out some prime numbers, some connections between them. So I typed some question into ChatGPT, and it informed me that 25 was a prime number, which in fact 25 is not a prime number. Okay, so there's some wrong things there. And there's one used to be able to do how many what is it? How many something are in strawberry? How many R's? Yeah, how many R's are in strawberry? And there are three, but it would report two. Okay. And there are some reasons why it does that. It's not just stupid. It's not anything. It's not smart. It's not stupid. It's just how it is. Okay. There's also a problem that AI can have biases. If the material that it reads have some kind of historical or cultural or societal, any other kind of bias, then that will be reflected in the answers. Okay. So you can't always trust that it's not going to do that. Okay. So if you're in a field that includes race, gender, or ethics or societal things like that, then you are certainly going to have to be careful with what you get. Okay. So that's just a general criteria here or general advice. AI may not know what it's talking about. You have to know that what it is reporting to you is correct. It has a way of collecting and organizing from a vast store of information that you can use to your advantage when you're doing research. Okay. But you can't assume that it knows what it's talking about. You have to independently verify the things that you find. Okay. And it's always important that whatever you put out is in your own words and your own ideas. Okay. It can't do your work for you. Okay. So, some things that you could do when it comes to AI. Okay. The first thing is that, and this depends upon your instructor, but if you use AI, if it's okay to use AI to some degree, you need to be transparent about it. Okay. You have to acknowledge that. And that could either be directly that you cite the AI, or it could be in some kind of methodology or acknowledgement section. Okay. Something like, I I used whichever chat GPT to help me generate some of the ideas for this project. Okay. So transparency is important. Okay. And again, you always want to make sure that the things that AI tells you are correct based on some other source. Okay. I know I teach computer programming a lot, and students want to validate their program with their program. Okay. That doesn't make sense. You have to validate your program through some external source. Okay. So whatever you're saying needs to be true, not just AI true. Okay. So as far as some best practices for using this in your research, I think the first thing is the overriding principle is that you want to balance the artificial intelligence with human insight. You have to have an intelligence that you're applying to this and the work effort you're applying to it to find a solution. Okay, so AI can be there to support you, but it's not going to do your critical thinking for you. It's not going to do your analysis for you. Okay. It's not going to come up with original ideas. When you ask it for topics, it gives you some broad topics that people have done before, but those can hopefully trigger you to think of things that are original in your own way. Okay. So I think that's very important. Okay. So, um, we've been inching toward AI in ways we don't always acknowledge. So should you, when your paper's all written, submit it to AI to have it do a grammar check, make sure it makes sense? Okay. Again, it depends upon the professor on how they're going to view that. But in my opinion, if you ask it to correct your grammar and you correct the grammar yourself, I don't have an issue with it. Okay. We've been using things like Grammarly for a long time, which is an artificial intelligence. We've been using, Microsoft Word has grammar and spelling hints. Okay. What AI will do for you sometimes when you ask it to look at something and see if it's okay, it will rewrite it for you. It'll change all your passive voice to active voice. It'll change the wording around for it to sound better and whatever it thinks sounds better. Okay. That, if you see that, you can look at that as a viewpoint. Okay. But I would not cut and paste that response as my response. Okay. You have to be driving the research. Okay. And that doesn't change. Okay. So let's talk about some of the different kinds of AI tools that are out there. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me make sure I've got the right screen up here. Looks like it. Okay. So ChatGPT is the one that I use most, but there are others. Okay. So here's a look at ChatGPT. Okay. So some tips to using ChatGPT. The chat part is important. Okay. These are connected conversations. So what you say in this little box, in this message ChatGPT in the first box, it carries on through the rest of your queries. So you can ask it to change something, you can ask it to modify things in some way, whatever you want it to do, you can do that. But I think before you do that, you want to make sure that you give a background information. Okay. You want the chat GP to understand the situation that you're in. Okay. So if I'm going to ask it to create some sample test questions for a class, I will go through and give it the background. I'm teaching a senior level college course in operating systems. Um, and whatever the case is, and I want to do this, I want to do that. Okay. So the more you can add that to your chat, the better results you're going to get. Okay. So I think that's important. So, and if if it goes down the wrong path, well, then you can certainly um, direct it away from that. Okay. So let's do some examples here of things that we could do. So let's say I'm interested in English literature and physics, like I said before. Okay. So let's type in here, let's say, give me some research topics that combine physics and English literature. Okay. It's going to go out there and right away. So now we have some topics here. The physics of time and literature, quantum mechanics and postmodern narratives, entropy and chaos and dystopian literature and so forth. Okay. So again, these are not original. It's finding these from somewhere. Okay. So doing a straight up paper on this topic is not going to necessarily give you very much original work, but it may put you in the correct headspace to try to figure out what it is that you could do. Okay. So I think that's an important way to use it. Okay. So again, contextualize your questions as much as you can. Okay. So you can also, if you're having trouble finding sources, you can ask it. You know, let's see, what's a random tell me about the bus riots in Louisville because of desegregation. Okay. Yeah, it's going to pop up some stuff here. Okay, some background information. Okay. All of this looks very good. Okay, as far as the basics. Okay. So I'm not done, right? So, and it does go on a bit, go on as much as you want. Okay. So I'm not done with my research. This is a tool to get some background information quickly. Again, I think of it as like Wikipedia or like even doing a Google search. With a Google search, you're able to get an answer back, but you don't know if it's correct and it's not the final format that you want. Okay. So it's important to know also that the generative part means I will not get the same answer twice. And this has been a concern for faculty members in that it's difficult to know. You don't have that smoking gun that we used to have. You can't search for key phrases in a student's work and find it and assume that it's correct. Okay, so um, that's a problem. It's a good and a bad, but it's a problem from my perspective at least. But the other thing is that you will find that because it's trained on the same data every time, that there are hints to the style of ChatGPT that can be developed. Okay. I know in particular when it comes to programming that there are programming techniques that the AIs use that most people don't. Okay. And also if your professor has seen your writing before, if you suddenly change your voice entirely, it's not going to go well. Okay. So the other thing we can do with ChatGPT, which as a semi-professional photographer, I don't know what to think about. You can use it to generate images. Okay. So this doesn't always work every time. So let me try it here. So let's say I'm going to create a photo of I don't know, a fox riding a unicycle. Okay. Let's see, it's going to do it. Yeah, there it goes. So it's thinking about it. It takes a little while. It's longer than it does for anything else. There we go. We have a picture of a fox riding a unicycle. Okay. Um, I could say make it darker and more goth. See what it does. And I will probably burn. I think the free version of ChatGPT only lets you do 2 images a day. There you go. So it understood what we were doing. See, there we go. We also it wants me to get plus. I can only 2 images a day. Um, what can you do with that? What is that? Legally, I'm not sure there's a good answer to that. It's clear that the AI did not create this image entirely. It's a conglomeration of other images. Those images were created by somebody. Okay, so it's important that we keep that in mind that using this image is not free of complexity when it comes to copyright issues. Okay, so that's an issue for sure. Okay. So there are other tools available. We can look at one. Okay. That's not the one I want to look at next. We'll look at this one. So ChatGPT is the best multi-purpose one. And it is astounding the rate at which it's developing because every time you type in a chat and it answers you and you respond to that, and you can also click up or down arrow, do you like it or do you not like it, or a thumbs up or a thumbs down, it continues to build. Okay, so it's getting better in many ways. I know that this first hit, I want to say it was in January of this year. I think that's right. And at the time, I was worried about my students in programming classes cheating with it. So I would type in my assignments into ChatGPT to see what it gave me. And in January and February, it was giving me broken programs that did not work, that needed work for them to do anything. By April, May, it was giving me programs that did work. So it's increasing. So where does it go from here? It's hard to say because it's reading more information, but as it generates more information. So here's the long-term limit of what could happen. As if humans start using AI instead of their own brains to generate new knowledge, because again, AI doesn't generate new knowledge, it combines old knowledge, then we're going to keep running the same ideas through the AI, strengthening them as we go, and not adding new material. Okay, so this doesn't work long term. Okay. So there's another one out there called Claude. Okay. It's a Claude.ai. Claude has a reputation of being better for creative pursuits. Okay. So I can do something like um, write me a sonnet about weasels. Okay. Let's see what it does. So here we go. Now we have a nice little sonnet all about weasels. Okay. Um, is it good or is it bad? Well, that's up to the literary people. But again, what is this? What can we do with it? We can say this is a sonnet written by an AI. Okay. We can't claim ownership of anything except we wrote the prompt, right? I had the idea to have it create a sonnet about weasels, but that's not the same thing. That's like telling your friend who's a poet to write a sonnet about weasels. The poet's his, not yours. His or hers, not yours. Okay. So Claude AI is another one you can use for sure. And then a relatively new, in fact, it's so new it's experimental, is from Google, and it's called the Notebook LM. Okay, the LM again from there is a from the language model, large language models. Okay, and the idea here, let's see if any of these that we can look at. So basically, the idea behind this notebook LM, and it's free. I think it's free for everybody. You have to have a Google account, which most people do for your Gmail. But if you go to I think it's notebooklm.google.com. It's up there. Yeah, and you can add it to your account or whatever. You basically can put a bunch of different sources together. Okay, so if you were working on your thesis project, you can add sources which could be from anything, from stuff you've written, from documents you found. You put all this into your own custom um, artificial intelligence. Okay, you can then ask questions based on this material. Okay, so you're able to custom create the content that the AI will use for you. Okay, Google is a pretty big player in the AI field as well. Okay, they're adding to there, and I'm going to forget the name. They've got yeah, there's Bard. Google Bard is their AI tool that they're adding to it. Okay, so this allows you to use the powerful searching feature of AIs while constraining the sources it uses to things that you're aware of, okay, or that you have vetted yourself or that you've created yourself. So it's new. I haven't used it yet. I don't know how it's going to be. Okay. I don't know, but it's an interesting idea. Okay. We're also seeing AI. I know you either love or hate, or I guess you could be indifferent. If you're on Facebook and you go to read comments, there'll be an AI summary of the comments. Most users think this is really cool. Some people think it's a bad idea, whatever it is. So is that useful? Maybe. Don't know. It's up to you to decide. I know that for a while now, if you go to um, a business website, there'll be the ability to chat, with an agent that's not an agent, it's a bot. And with AI, those bots are getting better. Okay, they're still not perfect, but they are getting better. I just saw an article somewhere that there's a company that's creating a voice-based AI for customer service to cut down on the time it takes to get through a customer service. So the question becomes, is it better to wait the hour to talk to somebody that's a human that may or may not be well trained, or is it better to go to an AI that may or may not understand what you're doing, but it'll be quicker, if it understands it. So those are issues still to be worked out. So I think that's important. My first surprise encounter with AI had to be when I went to a Rally's hamburger place when I was visiting up in Kentucky. And it very clearly, a woman's voice came on and said, "I'm an AI agent to take your order." And it turned out that our order had some additions, some subtractions, whatever it was. And I'm like, there's no way this is going to be correct. But in that only one instance, it was correct. The order was correct. But there was one guy working the whole store. So had they reduced the number of people because of this AI, or was it just because it was late at night and someone didn't show up? I don't know the answer to those questions, but it does raise a lot of interesting questions. If an AI agent can do a better job than a person, then what does that mean? Just what does it mean? I don't know. So I guess to summarize things, AI is here. AI is not going to go away. It's not going to take all of our jobs, but it is going to impact the world. And I think this is what technology does. If you look, um, when I first started working in corporate America back in the 80s, there were not computers on every desk. There was a computer for the area that we would sometimes use, and that was it. So our job was primarily with calculators. I worked for an insurance company as an actuarial analyst. Our work was largely on, paper and pencil with calculators, and going to the computer for the big calculations. That's changed a lot now. There's a movie called The Apartment from the 60s that had Jack Lemmon as an underwriter for an insurance company. And he worked in this massive room full of desks that had a filing cabinet, and it had a calculator, a mechanical calculator that you would, punch the numbers in and pull the little lever down, and a typewriter. And that was it. So the way that work has changed because of the advent and the availability of personal computers is astounding. So AI is not going to be any different. It will reshape the corporate world as every other technology has, but it's not going to make it all go away. They're not going to replace humans anytime soon, if ever. I don't think that's possible. They're not human. They're not intelligent. Okay. So that's a different thing. But as far as your research goes, I think it makes sense to explore ways that AI can enhance your research. Okay. Your research should still be your ideas and your work and your effort and your insight into the world, which the world needs. But if you can use AI tools to help you find the information at your sources, to help you organize the data, to help you better craft your research, that's a good thing. Don't rely on it to do the heavy lifting for you, or I guess you do the heavy lifting. Don't rely on it to do the mental effort. It can do the drudgery, but the ideas have to be yours. Okay. And make sure that you acknowledge that you're using it. Okay. So I hope that you have found this to be an interesting topic. I use AI almost every day in my teaching. I use it to generate quizzes. Again, I have it give me a bunch of questions, and then I don't use any of them, but I use it as an idea generation. Okay. If I have a document I need to turn in or a paper I'm going to submit, I'm going to run it through to see what it has to say about the grammar. It doesn't tend to find anything, but I do. I'm not going to cut and paste it if it finds errors, but I will at least look at what it has to say. Okay. So it's a valuable tool, and just make sure we use it ethically and use it to enhance, not take the place of our efforts. Okay. So that's all I've got. about it. So I think that, if I can find out how to stop my video here, stop recording. Anyway, so hopefully that was interesting. And again, it's a topic that we need to be paying attention to.